Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Adil and I'll be your host for this evening's webinar. Firstly, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining today and sharing your Sunday evening with us. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker for what is our second webinar through this Dhul Hijjah webinar series. Those of you who joined us yesterday would have learnt about Mansa Musa and and you would have tasted some of the rich history of Islam in Africa. Whereas today we have another fantastic speaker who's going to walk you through Mecca, Medina, and give you a taste of the Hajj sites through the lens of history and what that means and how we can take that lens and delve further when we get to visit or as we continue learning about Hajj and Umrah and the holy cities. So our speaker for today is someone you may have seen online through Ilmfeed or History Nights, Dr. Wajid Akther. He's a doctor by trade, but a historian by heart, I should say. So, he's studied history at the LSE and also outside of university, and you will see that he's currently doing a series on Ilmfeed with historical stories related to Hajj. And others may know him from Charity Week or the British Islamic Medical Association and other affiliations he has. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Wajid to begin today's presentation. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa alamin wa salatu wa salam wa shukran bi al-mursalin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa ilayhi tasliman jami'an kathira. I want to thank the brothers and sisters at the Pilgrim charity for giving the opportunity to share a few words with you guys, but more importantly for the work that you guys are doing. In the old days, the work of helping people go on pilgrimage who couldn't afford to go on pilgrimage fell on either rich beneficent kings or patrons. But otherwise, most people couldn't even dream of it. It was down to the whims of a person, whether they went or not, and 99.99999% would never get a chance. And alhamdulillah, you guys have put together a charity and organization that is trying to help people go, and it's carrying on a legacy that came from well before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you guys with the best for helping people fulfill the fifth pillar of Islam. So today what I'm going to talk about is something slightly different to what I usually do. Usually what I do is I just tell you guys stories. If you've heard any of my stories, it's usually a chance for me to regale you with some kind of interesting tidbit or anecdote and try to draw a lesson from that. And I will do that today as well. But I want to do something slightly different, inshallah. So today we're going to do a historical walkthrough of Hajj. What does that mean? What is the purpose of Hajj? Let's start off with that first. The purpose of Hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran himself, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجِّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ, and complete the Hajj and Umrah for Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already tells us what is the purpose of Hajj. You need to do Hajj for His sake. He's asking us to do it for His sake. That is the number one purpose. Just like sometimes, we get into the mistaken zone where people try to justify fasting from the health benefits or not eating pork from the health benefits or the psychological benefits. These are all there. But the real reason we do it is because we're supposed to do it. We were told to do it, we have to do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to do it. So it's the same with Hajj. The reason we do it is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the creator, He knows what makes us tick, He knows how we work, He knows what we're like, and He told us to go on Hajj if we can. And therefore, that is the purpose. We do it for the pleasure of Allah, and inshallah to fulfill this obligation if we're able to. Now, we know that ibadah and praying and doing the different elements that make up Hajj, standing at Arafat and starting the Jamarat, all the different 50 elements that make up Hajj, we know that this ibadah is the purpose of Hajj. Everyone knows it because you don't get anyone who goes on Hajj and doesn't do these things. If you're going to go through the significant time, effort, money, expense, and energy to do something, you might as well tick the boxes if you can. So we know about this. We know that this is the primary purpose. But it's not the only purpose. And no one, when you go on Umrah or Hajj, no one can be 100% of the time doing Hajj. You can't be just in that praying zone 100% of the time. You can't pray 24 hours a day. You cannot fast 365 days of the year. In fact, it's not even advisable to do so, right? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us from fasting on Eid, because He knew that there would be some Muslims who would then fast 365 days a year. So to break that, He told us we're not allowed to fast on Eid. And similarly, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us, and the Prophet ﷺ taught us, that you can't pray all night. You need sleep as well. Your body has a right over you. So 24/7 ibadah is not the Muslim way. It's not the natural way, and the Muslim way is the natural way. It's not the natural way. So when you go on Umrah, when you go on Hajj, can you be doing 24/7 ibadah? Can you be 24/7 engaged in praying? Can you be 24/7 making dua? Can you 24/7 just be doing dhikr? Can you? As a human being, it's not even possible. At some point, you're not paying attention anymore. Your mind is just droned off into something else. You're just thinking of something else. It's not advisable. So what happens when you only have a plan A? What happens when you go for Umrah or Hajj and your only game plan is ibadah? That's it. There's nothing else on your horizon. Is that when you stop doing the ibadah, there's no plan B. There's no plan C. There's no plan D. There's no nothing. So it's time to go to Hardee's. It's time to go to Al-Baik. It's time to go to Herfy's. It's time to go and eat. And this is where the burger comes in. It's food. It's time for food. It's time to have a never-ending breakfast. It's time to go shopping. Because we go from hero to zero. We have nothing in between. But is there another way? Is there something else to do on Hajj or Umrah apart from intense ibadah and then intense eating of burgers? Is there anything in between those two intensities? I would say yes. What is the mistake that we're making? What's the mistake that we all make when we do this is that we're only looking at Hajj, we're only looking at Umrah through one lens, through one prism. We're only looking at it in one unilateral way. Hajj is on many levels. Hajj and Umrah can be experienced on many levels. The number one level is what we're there for. We're there for ibadah. We're here to worship, to follow the Quran and Sunnah. Yes, that's the number one level. But there are other levels as well. Hajj is a test of your endurance. It's an endurance test. It's difficult. There's work involved. You have to go around. You have to do different things. You have to get from here to there. There's going to be people who get in your way. It looks like they're sent to get in your way and to create as much difficulty for you as possible. It's a test of your endurance, of your patience. Hajj is also a spiritual journey where you inwardly reflect, where you consider, you think, and you ponder about yourself. Take accountability of yourself. Hajj is also a sociological event. This might be the first time you meet Muslims from China. This might be the first time you meet Muslims who are different color to you, who are different, and they're from different ages and different backgrounds and different languages and different everything. Certainly for the people of the past, I mean, nowadays we live in multicultural societies, especially in the West, but certainly for the people in the past, the first time they might ever meet someone as exotic as a Maliki would be on Hajj. Everyone for 1,000 miles in every direction was a Hanafi, right? So Hajj is a chance to meet people from different backgrounds as well. And the last lens, the one I want to teach you guys about, is the historical Hajj. Hajj is a historical event. This is an event that has taken place for centuries, for millennia. This is an event that very, very, very likely your ancestors went on, right? You don't know, most of us don't know even the names of our great-great-grandfather. And definitely I would say that 99.999%, I'd be really impressed if anyone knows the name even of their great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, so their grandfather's grandfather. So you might not know their name. You might even not know where they lived. You won't know their job. You won't know anything. But one thing you probably know is that someone somewhere in your ancestry, especially if your family has been Muslim for generations, someone somewhere went on Hajj. Right? So you are walking in the footsteps of your own family. The Hajj, you can look through a historical lens. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So how do you go from this? How do you go from this image? They're looking at Hajj like this, when you look at Hajj, you see this construction site, marble, big buildings, millions of people. How do you go from looking at this to looking at it a little bit like this? Different. A lot less people. Buildings everywhere, structures that you don't recognize. How do you go from this to this? Well, there are 3 steps. Step 1, right? And for me, this is why this talk is important, because I'm giving you my secrets. This is how I start looking at things from a historical lens. And this you don't get, you get a lot of people telling you about the history, but you don't get people telling you about how to connect with history. And I had to think about this, like how do I connect as well? So for me, this is the most important slide. How do you connect to the historical Hajj? Number 1, you need to read and learn before you go. Like if you went on any holiday, you would read about where you're going, right? You want to read, like, wait, what languages they speak there, what are their cultures like. I don't want to turn up in a different country and then suddenly insult them without realizing, or turn up in a country and realize that, wait a minute, they don't speak the language I thought they spoke, or, so you got to be able to learn and read before you go. So read some books on the historical Hajj. Read about the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ. And I have, at the end, I'll have some book recommendations. So not only should you read about it, read the seerah. You want to learn about the Hajj, you're going through the seerah. Read about the life of Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ. Because the more you read, but this time you read it as a guidebook, don't read it as a storybook, read it as a guidebook about the locations. Because you're going to go to those locations and you're going to see them yourself. So read and learn before you go. I'm not saying become an alim. I'm not saying go get a degree. I'm not saying that you just read a few books, read a few stories. That's all I'm saying. And nowadays, watch a few YouTube videos. But they'll play in your mind. The human brain is able to remember stories so well. Forget the statistics, 1066, 350 archers, 25 feet. Who cares? Forget that. The story. Read the story. And now, you've read the story and now you've flown over. You've done your ibadah. You have prayed. You have done your umrah, or you've done your ibadah for the day. Maybe you're on day 2. Maybe you're on day 3. Pick the right time and the right place. What do I mean? The right time is not before you do your ibadah, because you have to concentrate on your ibadah. You cannot be thinking about, oh wow, this is a historical. This is so amazing historically, but I'm just going to miss my Hajj if I don't get to Arafat on time. Nobody can, you got to get to Arafat on time. You have to do your ibadah, you have to do what you came there to do. But once you take care of that, and you rested, and you ate some food, and you've taken a break, then maybe set yourself some time. You know that, look, on day 1, I'm going to be busy with ibadah, but day 2 is going to be pretty free. Or day 2, I'm going to do zikr and I'm going to meet people, inshallah. Day 3, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go on a little tour. My own tour, right? So day 3, so choose the right time and the right place. The right place is not also usually, literally in the middle of the tawaf, at the busiest period. That's not the right place. The right place is probably going to be at a different time. The right place is probably going to be when you're back in your room, you have a bit of time to think about it. Maybe you go to a quiet corner of the Haram or Masjid Nabawi. This is what I would do. So for me, for example, I would choose the evenings. I loved the nighttime because it's less hustle and bustle. I don't have to worry about anyone else, especially after, my wife is asleep, my children are asleep when they were going with me, or when I was with my parents. People are asleep. The night is for me to dream, right? So I would sit by myself in the part of the Haram, part of Masjid Nabawi myself. So choose the right time and the right place. And then the last part 3, now imagine, now ponder, reflect, look around you. Don't look at the surface, look beyond the surface. Think about the stories associated. When you look at Safa and Marwa, look at the mountain of Safa, the hill of Safa, sit there. And then think to yourself, where was Safa in the seerah? SubhanAllah, isn't Safa the same mountain that the Prophet ﷺ stood on to make Islam public for the first time? It was there, it was there in the seerah. That when Islam was the first time it went public, the Prophet ﷺ stood on Safa and he shouted to the people of Mecca that if I told you, he told them to come to him. So they came rushing, because if anyone had a major announcement to give, you stood on Safa and you made your announcement. It was like the Twitter of Mecca at the time, right? You got to say something. There's no point saying something on MySpace. It's not going to happen, right? But if you go to Twitter or Instagram and you make an announcement, people will hear about it. So the Twitter, Instagram at that time was Safa. You would go to Safa, you'd say it, everyone would immediately lock onto your mentions or whatever the correct terminology is. So everyone locked onto what the Prophet was saying. And this is the time when he was cursed by his own uncle. He said that this is what you called us for? You called us for this? You wasted all our time? SubhanAllah. Like, this incident is from where Islam went public. And from that point on, the world would become two. Those who believed and those who didn't. Now when you look at Safa, you look at it differently. Right? But to go from looking at the Safa and just be like, yeah, I need to do Safa Marwa, I need to brainlessly do sa'i on it, to this was I can imagine the Prophet ﷺ standing there and making this announcement. To go from that one to the other, you need a bit of time. When I was young, my best friend's family and my family, we went on Umrah together. And one of the times we went on Umrah, and we were kids, so we weren't even sure that going from from Safa to Marwa, was that one sa'i, or from Safa to Marwa and back to Safa, was that one counted as one sa'i? So we were like, well, let's just do Safa to Marwa, let's be on the safe side. Let's just go from Safa to Marwa and back to Safa, and we'll count it as one. So we blitz it. We literally just ran all the way from Safa to Marwa, back to Safa, and did it. So we did 14 circuits instead of 7. And we finished, and our parents were still on like circuit 2 or 3. So you could tell how fast we were running, yeah? Just crazy kids, people shouting at us and screaming at us. And then when we finished, we asked them, we said, which were we right? And they said, no, you were wrong. Safa to Marwa was 1. So we were like, oh, let's do it properly this time. So we did Safa to Marwa 1. So we did it 21 times, and we still finished before our parents. I wasn't paying, you're not paying attention when you're that age. You're not paying attention. This is a tough mudder challenge or whatever they call it. The triathlon. I'm just trying to do it as fast as I can. I've got my stopwatch on. My Casio watch. I want to see how quickly I can do it. This is not how you do Umrah. This is not how you're going to get a historical Hajj. You need to think about it for a little while. So don't do it like I did it when I was a kid. So let me show you. Mecca, Hajj and Medina, just a few examples. We'll still finish on time, inshallah. But let's put this, implement it into practice. So let's start with Mecca. You look at this. Everyone recognizes this. Everyone sees this picture. You recognize it. What did you see? What do you see? You see the Kaaba, right? And that's it. Most people, when you look at that, when they're praying, when they're in the Haram itself, what do they see? They see the Kaaba. That's it. The direction of prayer. What do you see when you put on your history glasses? When you sit back and you think. Now put on your history glasses, what do you see? I'll tell you what I can see. Just a few things. Same picture. I see the Hajar Aswad. And when I look at it now, I'm reminded of the story of the Prophet ﷺ, how the Hajar Aswad was needing to be replaced, and it was a moment of great danger because they were all arguing. And you know what happens when the Jahili Arabs argue? When the Arabs in the time of the Jahiliyyah, when they argue, basically it's time to kill each other. I mean, they killed each other for chickens because one chicken went over a fence or something like that. There was a story along those lines, and the two families just killed each other for generations over that. So this is going to be a legitimate excuse for them to kill each other. And how did they resolve it? Because the Prophet ﷺ turned up and came up with an answer that was pure genius, subhanAllah, before he was a prophet. It shows wisdom. Now I'm reflecting on the black stone. I'm also thinking about the black stone, about how the Prophet ﷺ kissed it, but he took great care to kiss it. And then Umar anhu made a statement when he kissed it. He said words to the effect, "I'm only kissing you because the Prophet ﷺ kissed you." Why did he say that? I mean, he didn't need to say it. It's not like there's no point saying that, but the reason he said it because he was worried that people will think that there's some kind of hidden idolatry behind it or something like that. But because the Prophet ﷺ did it, but Umar did it too. So what else do I see in this picture? I see these stones. I bet you almost none of you saw the stones, right? Trust me, it took me years to notice them. I mean, I noticed them because when you walk around the Kaaba, if you walk with your eyes closed, well, you're only walking with the ibadah lens on, then you're doing ibadah, mashallah, continue doing it. But when you finish your ibadah, if you're walking around with the history glasses on, why is these stone pillars, marble base around the Kaaba, it's called the Shadarwan. So it's there to protect the base of the Kaaba. And it's all around just pure marble, except this spot here, they've got bricks. They have surface of bricks stuck into the marble. I've seen it before, and I was just like, I don't know. Why did they do that? I have no idea. You know why they did it? That is the spot where the Prophet ﷺ was taught how to pray by Jibreel ﷺ. In that spot. So this little marker that you can't notice unless you're wearing your history glasses is there to remind us. Because remember, if there was a sign there for that, and there's a sign everywhere, then the whole haram would be full of signs. We're here to pray and do ibadah first, so it's not a museum first, it's a masjid first. So this is there for us to kind of realize. So this is where the Prophet ﷺ was taught to pray, and from here, the rest of humanity learned how to pray. So where we learned how to pray for the first time. What else do you see? You see the Hijr Ismail. You see the Hatim, the area which was, why is it there? Most people don't know the story. A lot of people do, but a lot of people don't. That used to be part of the Kaaba. The Kaaba was not square, it was not cube like it is today. The Kaaba was longer. It was a rectangle. It was much shorter. It didn't have a roof. It didn't have a door, and it had a window. It had two doors, not a closed door, just two openings, one for entrance and one for exit. And it had a window as well. So the Kaaba looked very different at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And this was built because when the Quraysh were rebuilding the Kaaba, at the time when the same incident when they were trying to put the Hajar Aswad back and the Prophet ﷺ came, at that time the Kaaba had been destroyed by floods. So they were rebuilding the Kaaba, but they had to rebuild the Kaaba they wanted to rebuild it with only halal money. That meant no money from gambling or prostitution, no interest. Even the Quraysh knew that interest was haram before Islam. So they wanted to build the Kaaba with halal money. And despite being a huge, rich city like Mecca, rich businessmen and businesswomen, the whole of Mecca did not have enough halal money to rebuild the Kaaba in its original shape. So that tells you how much drowned they were in evil. But I wonder how much of us today, if you asked the whole of the Muslim community in the UK, let's build one masjid and let's not use any haram money, no money that has touched interest from an interest-bearing bank account, I bet you we would have struggled to build one mosque. Every single one, most of the Muslims you know are involved in interest, and there may be reasons for it, and they may have fiqh reasons for it. I'm not a fuqaha, not a fiqhi, I'm not going to talk about that, but it's something to know. So therefore they made this enclosure to signify the area that was missed out. And also that enclosure is bigger than the area that's missed out. What else do you see? You see the Maqam Ibrahim, where the footsteps of Ibrahim are. If that doesn't connect you to Ibrahim, what else will? His literal footsteps. And people go on and on about like, oh, the footsteps are really big. I mean, was he a giant? Yes, people were bigger in much longer ago. The people were different shapes and sizes. But if you go to the beach and you put your foot in sand, or you put your sand in cement, the imprint that you leave is much bigger because everything spreads out, right? It's bigger with time. It's not like comically large feet anyway, but this is the imprints of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Maqam Ibrahim. And you should know that behind the Maqam Ibrahim was the favorite praying spot of our Prophet alayhi salam. Although this is not the original location of Maqam Ibrahim, but that's another story. You see the Ottoman porticos. You see these? Those are the Ottoman porticos built by the Ottoman in the Ottoman Empire time. And who built them? None other than Sinan, the master architect, was responsible for these buildings. He's also the person who's responsible for the way that the Dome of the Rock looks like today. You know the way the Dome of the Rock looks with the golden arch and the tiles on the outside? It didn't used to have these beautiful Turkish tiles. That was Sinan. What else do you see? You see the well of Zamzam. Literally, there's a spot there. They removed the sign, but you can work it out. Look at where the door of the Kaaba is, and if you walk, I'd say about 20 steps, so past Maqam Ibrahim, another 10 steps, you're in the location. This is the spot where a little baby was left by his mother, alayhi salam, and kicked the ground because he was thirsty, and an angel was sent to spear the ground with the tip of the angel's wing, and the Zamzam came out. This is the spot. You're standing on that spot. If you don't know about it, your mind will not just jump to these beautiful thoughts. What else do you see? There's something I'm going to talk about. There's hundreds of things actually, by the way, but we have to. I want to finish the talk, so I'll give you another example. If you are praying in that front row, right? You know, when you go to your mosque, if you are in the front row, it's a different feeling to being in the second row or the third. The front row, right at the front, it feels good. It feels good. Like you're at the front row. It feels nice to be in the front row. Now imagine that feeling, but being on the front row of the entire world. Of the entire world. No one is in front of you now through this prayer. Behind you will be not one or two people, but entire nations, entire continents are behind you. You're in the front row of the world. Trust me, when you pray there and you realize that you're in the front row of the world, your brain goes, you think differently. That khushu', that thought process is different. So you can see what happens when you put on your historical glasses. When you start thinking about it, when you imagine the Prophet ﷺ doing tawaf, and the great scholars and the great leaders in the Muslim world doing tawaf, and you imagine your own ancestors doing tawaf, then you start thinking, subhanAllah, this is amazing. That's what history lens does to you. And there's more and more we can, this is Safa and Marwa we talked about. And if you walk out of Bab Safa, so outside where there's a gate called Bab Safa, when you walk out there, there's a pole over here, and when you right next to that pole was a house. And the house belonged to our Prophet ﷺ. That was Khadija radiallahu anha's house. This is the house the Prophet ﷺ lived in for the longest period of his life. and underneath your feet is this excavation, which is the actual house that the Prophet ﷺ lived in. At the time, there's a really good book that details about it when it was last excavated in the 1970s, and then they covered it up and closed it. It's subterranean. The level of ground rises as the years go by, so it's like quite a lot lower than ground level. And when you stand here at Bab Safa, again, wear your history glasses, and you look around, what do you see? You see KFC, of course. First thing you see, just on the right. But just behind KFC used to be the house of Abu Bakr Anhu. And Abu Bakr Anhu's house was there. So now, wait, you just think to yourself, I don't know that Abu Bakr Anhu and the Prophet ﷺ were friends in childhood. They grew up differently. The Prophet ﷺ grew up quite poor, and he was an orphan. And Abu Bakr Anhu grew up quite wealthy. So they didn't grow up in the same neighborhood. So when did they become friends? Most likely they became friends when the Prophet ﷺ married Khadija radiallahu anha, and then became rich. Like he was now in the rich part of society. So being in the rich part of society, you move to the rich part of town. So the Prophet ﷺ moved to the rich part of town, and now he's living in the rich part of town, in a nice place behind the mountain of Safa. It's a good place, a good house, multiple rooms, even has a guest room. The Prophet ﷺ's financial situation is very different to what it used to be. And when you live in the rich part of town, you make friends with the other people who live in the rich part of town. And one of the other people who live in the rich part of town was Abu Bakr Anhu. And this is where the friendship begins. And now your brain is starting to think, the friendship that changed the world, this is where it started. And I can see how they became friends, because they're so close to each other. They must have passed by each other. They become real people to you. They're not just myths and legends. So that's Makkah. What about Hajj locations? And we're coming towards the end. So Hajj locations in Medina. So again, put on your history glasses. You go to Hajj, and this was the Jamarat, which signifies the Shaitaan, in the 1950s. And you can see it. It's not much taller than human height. So if the average human being is 5-6 foot, it's about 10 feet high. It's not that tall. It's not huge, and you can get right up close to it. And around it, there's shops and stuff like that. Even a prominent Coca-Cola sign. And I don't know why people can make jokes about Coca-Cola and Shaitaan being really close to each other. I'm not going to make that joke. Pepsi Man myself. But anyway, but now 2020. The new and improved Shaitaan. Bigger. It's now 2-3 stories tall. Huge. You can't even get close. Cool. Like, if you're not thinking, you just go into, you throw your Jamaat and you go. But if you're thinking, you're like, there's a lesson in here. Somewhere, it's not even that far deep, buried under the surface. Shaitaan is growing. Shaitaan actually evolves. The Shaitaan at the Jamarat, and this is not a visual representation of Shaitaan, but it's something for us to realize that as the years change, so does Shaitaan. Right? 100 years ago, Shaitaan would try to trick the Muslims by getting us to drink alcohol and by getting us to murder someone. And now he's going to trick you what? By getting you to slide into someone's DMs. I believe that's what it's called. By getting you to do something haram on social media, by getting you to do different things, because he's evolving. And there's no better representation than if you wear your history glasses and think, subhanAllah, this is a lesson for us. But also, why are these Jamarat there? The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Jamarat is the location that Shaitan appeared to Ibrahim alayhi salam and tried to stop him from sacrificing Ismail alayhi salam 3 times. So think about it now. Why 3 times? What is that a sign of? If Shaitan does that, turns up 3 times, he's desperate. He's desperate, right? He didn't just turn up once and say, hey, come on, man, just forget about it. Well, it didn't work. Well, go ahead. He was like, no, I can't let this happen, because if this happens, this is going to be a thing until the day of judgment. They're going to be doing Eid al-Adha and they're going to be getting the benefits of the sacrifice. No, I can't allow this. He was desperate to stop this happening. What else? Are each of the Jamarat the same? No, actually, they look different. They're different sizes. Why? Because when Shaitaan appeared to Ibrahim a.s., he didn't come to him and say the same thing 3 times. He came to him 3 different ways. He attacked Ibrahim a.s. 3 different ways. He's smart. He's smarter than most of us. Not smarter than Ibrahim a.s., but he's smart. Right? So when he attacks you, he's not going to come to you the same way each time. Sometimes he's going to come to you trying to get you from the money angle. Sometimes he's going to come to you trying to get you from the doubts about Islam, or the angle of, like, Islam is inherently violent, or Islam is inherently not on the side of human rights or women's rights or whatever. Sometimes he's going to come to you from when you're at your lowest ebb, when you're feeling down. Sometimes he's going to come to you when he's feeling up. The game plan is right there. Right? What does he have to do? Does he have to give you does he have to do a YouTube video himself? He's giving you the game plan. It's there. It's for us. If you wear your history glasses, you'll see it. If you don't, you throw your stones and you walk away. Okay? And the day of Arafat, again, you can put on your history glasses and you think, who do you think about? You think about our Prophet ﷺ. You imagine our Prophet ﷺ, he gave not one, he gave multiple khutbahs during Hajj. So we always think it's just like one big khutbah. He stood at the top of Jabal Rahmah and he gave this khutbah and that was it. Khalas, done. No. The Prophet ﷺ, if you read about it, he gave multiple khutbahs, and it was like he was desperate to get across the message and to check that he got across the message. So Arafat, you can sit there, and when you go there, you can think about our Prophet ﷺ. What did he say? What was he trying to get across? What were the important messages that he wanted us to know at this time? Let's go to the last couple of slides before we finish, inshallah. Medina. You go on Hajj and you go to Medina, right? You go on Umrah, you go to Medina. We go to Ziyarat. We love our Prophet ﷺ and we want to go to Medina. And, in Medina especially, like that history set of glasses must be on, because there's a huge amount packed into that one little place. So let's try this again. You go to Medina, what do you see? And a lot of times, I know for our sisters especially, I feel sorry because you don't have the access that the brothers have to the historical parts of the masjid. But let me reassure you that I've checked where the sisters are allowed to go. I've asked my wife, my mom, where are the sisters allowed to go? And you are allowed to go everywhere where you're not kept from any of the places of historical significance. So even though your time is limited, but you are able to go to all those places. So without further ado, let's put on your history glasses. What do you see? Again, everyone sees here the Rawda, the garden from the Gardens of Paradise, where the Prophet ﷺ used to pray, Masjid Nabawi, the original Masjid Nabawi. But then you see things. When you put on your history glasses, you see this. You see this. It was moving. You see the mihrab. So why is there a mihrab? Because usually a mihrab indicates the direction of Qibla. That's where the Imam prays. But this is a mihrab where the Imam doesn't pray. The Imam prays on a different one. Why is this mihrab there? Because this is where the Prophet ﷺ used to lead his prayers. And the mihrab is built in such a way so that if you were to pray here and do your sajda here, you will be putting your feet where you were putting your head where the Prophet ﷺ's feet was. This is built by the Mamluk sultans. And what else do we see? We see that there's a difference in the color of the carpets. Why is there a difference in the color of the carpets? Because the color of the carpet signifies different areas of the masjid. This color carpet is the original mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. Red carpet is a new extension well afterwards. So you know that you're in the original area without having to have a sign everywhere. And there are more. What's going on here? Why is this pillar red colored and that one's white? And why does this a double pillar and that one's a single pillar? And there's more and more and more. Why is this base like this? There's a base that has a golden edge, and so on and so forth. Some pillars have a sign on them. Why? Again, if you don't notice, and when I was younger, I didn't notice a lot. I just thought that symmetry wasn't a thing that Muslims did, until I realized that symmetry was definitely a thing that Muslims did, and therefore when there is asymmetry, it's for a reason. And then you realize that this is a code. This is the most fantastic thing, actually. This is a secret map, a secret code for those who know, that tell you about stories and events that happened in these locations without having to put up a sign. Because the previous generations, especially the Ottomans, the Mamluks, the Ayyubids, the Abbasids, what were they going to do? Were they going to put up a sign everywhere? If they put up a sign everywhere in Masjid Nabawi for anything that was of any value, there would literally be a sign every few steps. In fact, there would be signs on top of signs, right? Because there was there will be a sign that's from the Prophet ﷺ time, and then there'll be another sign from the Sahaba time, another sign from the Umayyad time and Abbasid time. So you'd have 20 signs on top of each other. What would you do? Where would you pray? Right? This is a mosque. It's there for prayer. It's not a museum, but it has historical value. So you do these little changes that make you realize that there's a difference. And I am still trying to work out what these different signs mean. I've found some of them out, but a lot of them, they're still maybe stuck in a book somewhere. God knows. I've been asking scholars. I've been asking people. They've been on a mission to try to find out what every one of these things mean. But I believe that there is definitely meaning to all of them. They're not done by chance. So here's one example. Well, actually, a simple example. What is this gold leaf? This gold leaf is not everywhere in the masjid, right? On the pillars, some of them have this gold leaf. This gold leaf was the original height of Masjid Nabawi. It gives you a sense of proportion, right? Because right now Masjid Nabawi is huge. You go to the skies and to the sides. This was the original height of Masjid Nabawi. And the gold leaf, because the original roof of Masjid Nabawi at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was what? Date palm leaves, right? Dried date palm leaves. So this is dried date palm leaves in effect. This pillar, it says over here, Ustuwana Aisha radiallahu anha. The pillar of Aisha radiallahu anha. Why is it called the pillar of Aisha radiallahu anha? Because this is the only pillar with that specific name. It's called that because Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Prophet ﷺ had told her about a pillar, a spot in Masjid Nabawi, that if the people knew the value of praying at that spot, they would draw lots. They would draw lots between each other because everyone would want to pray at that spot. And she wouldn't tell people because she didn't want them to have like a huge queue in this area. So she didn't tell anyone, but everyone left. And the last one to leave was her nephew, Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu. And he stayed a little while longer. And a little while later, he came out and he prayed in this spot. And everyone watched where he was praying, and he prayed in the spot. So they were like, this is it. This is the pillar. And for those who know, it's a really important, useful place to pray in. If you look at the top, right at the top of some of the pillars, right at the top, you will see a sign here. You can barely read it, but what does it say? It says, Had Masjid al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Had, the limit. This is the limit of how big the Masjid Nabawi was. So, we have the golden palm for the height, and now this is for the where the limits, the boundaries are. And there's many things that they just Adil has put on a really nice link with all the different pillars out there. Read up about them, read stories about them. This will be really useful, inshallah, and it will, again, easier to put on those historical things. There are many more. If you look at old pictures of Masjid Nabawi, for example, in the courtyard just outside where the Prophet ﷺ is buried, there's like an opening area where they have these umbrella things that come up. So there's a little courtyard area. If you look at the old pictures, actually it might be here. Go back. Let me go back 1 second. 1, 2, 2. Yes. You see this courtyard picture? In every picture, until literally 100 years ago, or less than 100 years ago, these date palms were there. And people used to think, I used to think that, out of everything that you have in Masjid Nabawi, you have to preserve these date trees. I mean, they literally have like a wall around them, and I think I remember seeing the boundary around it, not the actual tree, because it was cut before I was born, not long before I was born, and that's because these trees were planted by the Prophet ﷺ himself, these date trees, and people used to eat. They still used to eat the dates from those trees, but unfortunately, they were chopped down. Okay. So I'll finish off with this last thing. Why do we want to do this history business, right? Why do you need to do this? It's because when you do it, you get a connection with our Prophet ﷺ, with our religion, that you wouldn't have when you don't. And the best example I could give you is when I went to Jannat al-Baqi. You can go to Jannat al-Baqi where the graveyard is during the day, but I wanted to go in the middle of the night. The reason I wanted to go in the middle of the night is because I knew the Prophet ﷺ, which there is after Aisha, and I waited in the right spot. And as soon as the janazah finished, I ran and I just went in with the group of the janazah as if I was one of the mourners. And I went into Jannat al-Baqi, and then I broke off from the burial site, and I went for a walk. And this is a picture that I took. It's a really shady picture because I was doing some shady business, obviously. I was walking around, and then it hit me, because I wanted to work out, why did the Prophet ﷺ go at Jannat al-Baqi so often? It was something that he used to do a lot. So I was walking around in the night, in the same, like, imagining what the Prophet ﷺ was going through, because it's just, I'm under the starry skies like the Prophet ﷺ was. I can see the graves before me like the Prophet ﷺ can. It's pitch dark like at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then it hit me. And I was by myself, like the Prophet ﷺ usually was, by himself. And then I realized, oh, this is where all his friends are buried. That's why he comes here at night. Because he's been on this amazing journey through his whole life, going from prophethood to the end of the prophethood. And not all of his friends who were helping him and who were part of this journey were there with him at the end. Many of them had died beforehand. And this is where his friends were buried. And he wanted to come, Sam, and perhaps he wanted to be with his old friends. He wanted to remember them. When it's his good times, you remember the people who helped you get there. And that really hit home. It made the Prophet ﷺ real for me again. It made me realize that, subhanAllah, like this thing, he wasn't just this angel who came from out of outer space and was impervious to feelings and could do anything. And he's the Prophet ﷺ, so whatever he wants, he can do. And sadness and happiness, this is nothing for him. No, you realize, subhanAllah, he's a real human being, and he missed his friends. And it really hits you. My brothers and sisters, history is important. So when you go next time, inshallah, put on your history classes, read up beforehand, find the right place, the right time, and just imagine. Because just like these two carpets are different, the red carpet is today, and the green carpet is the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is this is a Riyadh al-Jannah. So I took this picture, 1 foot in, 1 foot out of Jannah, right? That's the difference in the world of
Barakallah.
Jazakallah khair.